How do you think you were able to get a job at Google when the company was so early on?
So I fortunately got a call and figured it was a long shot. But when I showed up for my interviews, it turns out that the deputy general counsel at the time was somebody that I worked with. I was just really fortunate. And I learned later, which is really humbling, that she left the interview and was like, we need to hire her immediately.
The Abstract is brought to you by Spotdraft, an end-to-end contract lifecycle management system that helps high-performing legal teams become 10 times more efficient. If you spend hours every week drafting and reviewing contracts, worrying about being blindsided by renewals, or if you just want to streamline your contracting processes, Spotdraft is the right solution for you. From creating and managing templates and workflows to tracking approvals, e-signing, and reporting via an AI-powered repository, Spotdraft helps you in every stage of your contracting. And because it should work where you work, it integrates with all the tools your business already uses. Spotdraft is the key that unlocks the potential of your legal team. Make your contracting easier today at spotdraft.com. How has the legal ops profession evolved over the years? What was it like to be there at the birth of legal ops? And how can you break into the field? Today, I'm joined live at CLOC by DeAnna Papedis, Head of Legal Contract and Product Program Management and Operations at Google. DeAnna was an early hire at Google in 2005, and she has been an integral part of the growth of the legal team. DeAnna, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Before we start talking about the history of legal ops, we're here at CLOC. What's your favorite part of being at CLOC?
Oh, well, I've been at CLOC since the first one in San Francisco. Obviously, I'd never imagined it would be this big.
Yeah.
So my favorite part is connecting with people, meeting new people, connecting with friends who I know in the industry, and being able to catch up with them. It doesn't hurt to be in Vegas because I'm a big gambler. And of course, seeing the newer technologies and what's out there and available is nice as well. So, being able to meet with several vendors and see what we might want to be considering for Google.
You're a good craps player, I've found out.
I try, but I think I've been blamed for some losses this week. So
That's unfair. I certainly wouldn't blame you. It's gambling, right?
That's right.
You joined Google in 2005, and before Google and your tenure there, you'd already established yourself. You had a really well-established sort of career as a legal professional at some global law firms. 2005, Google was also not the large, multinational, incredible company that it is today. So joining was probably a bit of a risk. I will hear from you. How did you decide to apply? And how do you think you were able to get a job at Google when the company was so early on?
My application story is a bit of a funny one.
Yeah.
So Google is located right outside of a music amphitheater.
Sure.
The main campus. And I was actually I had been in law firm life for 12 years already, kind of over it, wanted to go in-house. I was driving to a concert and my brother, we were stuck in traffic to get into the venue.
I've been to this venue
Have
before
you?
and I've waited in traffic, yes.
He looks over, he's like, hey, Dee, there's the Google sign. Why don't you apply there and next time we could park at your work instead of sitting in this traffic. And I was like, okay. So I put my resume in the next day and I've been there ever since.
That's amazing. Was it a difficult process to get interviewed and to join? And
for sure, especially back then, interviewing at Google took months, and it was kind of like well known for being a very difficult process.
Yeah.
So I fortunately got a call and figured it was a long shot. But when I showed up for my interviews, it turns out that the deputy general counsel at the time was somebody that I worked with back at a law firm. I ran the summer associate program when she was a summer associate. So she came in and immediately knew me and remembered my work, and we worked together back at the firm. So I was just really fortunate. And I learned later, which is really humbling, that she left the interview and was like, we need to hire her immediately. So
that's great.
yeah.
Connections
I got
are
lucky.
everything. Who who you've, hopefully impressed
That's right.
throughout your career is everything. Was it scary to leave the law firm and join Google? Like, what were those early years like?
Heck yeah, it was scary. Um, I had a long history in law firms. I understood it. I didn't understand how to go to a company originally. The offer was significantly less pay,
Sure.
but I was done with like working in the law firm. So, ultimately, I really debated whether to take it, and glad I did. The early days were extremely scrappy. Like it was
Yeah.
do anything that needs to get done.
Yeah.
So there was literally no bureaucracy. So it was just, whatever it needed to be, you did.
Right.
But then there was the fun stuff, so it made the company, really a good place to show up every day and really great people. And then, perks and food and, all the things that Google is known for.
Yeah. I feel like Google kind of established that whole idea of we're going to have meals for you, we're going to do your dry cleaning for it. Like I don't think of a lot of companies who were doing that before Google was actually.
Yeah. In the early days there was a lot of that. There were trampolines and there were just all ball pits outside of like conference rooms and and they still have a lot of that today. Slides going from the second floor to the first floor.
Right.
Fun stuff.
That's cool.
Yeah.
When you were first hired, you were hired as like a contracts manager or contracts administrator, and then over time you transitioned into legal ops. Can you tell us about that transition? Because I think that transition also sort of happened as legal ops was becoming a term, a profession, an idea. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I had built a large team of legal assistants, and it was really before we were using the term legal operations. It may have existed, but I wasn't really aware of it.
Sure.
And the legal assistants did a lot of administrative / operational work along with doing some of the kind of more junior legal work. And so as legal operations started to really become more of a thing, that's when we sort of realized like we needed to sort of split those two roles and that's when I moved to focus more on the operations side versus the legal side.
Yep.
And so that was probably 15, 16 years ago now.
When you were making that transition, did you feel like everybody in the company understood what legal ops was? Or did you have to do like sort of education on the legal ops term?
I don't think everyone understands the term still today, right? Like,
yeah.
Especially with lawyers who, they are focused in one area and we're constantly having to remind them what we can do to help them.
Sure.
Like we can actually take a lot of that off of your plate so that you can focus on the important legal work that you need to do. Like that's why there are the legal professional roles, right?
Legal ops is a term. I think this is actually kind of interesting. I've talked about this with other guests on the podcast before. Is legal ops as a term widely understood, or are we still sort of making it up as we go? I think some people even think, hey, maybe legal operations is just operations and is very similar to business operations or product operations. I don't know if you have a view on that too.
I think that there's a lot of truth in that, right?
Yeah.
Operations that need to be scaled for any department have a lot of similarities.
Sure.
And so, I happen to grow up in the legal field, but I know other colleagues who have actually transitioned from legal operations into business operations. And I think there are a lot of transferable skills.
Sure.
So, operations just running a department, making sure that things are happening.
Other than getting a lot bigger, how has legal ops at Google sort of grown up over the years? Are there areas that you think that Google made specific investments or took, one path versus another that you think have been really important to the success of legal ops at Google?
Well, I mean, Google's a huge company.
Yeah.
So we are structured probably very differently than most other companies that you talk to, except for maybe some of the other really large companies.
Microsoft or
Meta.
Yeah.
And that means we have certain teams that are so big that they are embedded within the teams that they support. And then there are more centralized legal operations for things such as like legal billing, knowledge management. Those are things that we have central teams that can manage those things across the department. But like for my role, I'm embedded within our contracts and product counseling teams because we are so big within that space,
Right.
That takes entire teams on its own. We have embedded teams in e-discovery as another example. So
Right.
So we're not like on a smaller company, you might see like one legal operations team.
Yeah.
But when you get to the scale of Google, it's really hard to keep it like that.
That makes sense. The structure needs to be totally different. As you sort of grew in your career at Google, you started to build out your own team. I think that something that lots of folks who are taking on manager roles or trying to build, even at smaller companies, trying to build centralized, smaller legal ops teams, they're thinking about, how do I find the best talent? Like, how do I recruit and retain really top talent? Where do you look when you're hiring? And is it always outside Google?
No, it's not always outside Google. And to be fair, I haven't hired in a long time.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously the times are tough, so
Sure.
there is no headcount. So I haven't interviewed in a while, but I will start by saying that I have the best team. Everyone on my team's fantastic. I have, work with a lot of wonderful professionals. And it's, you can find those people internally, externally. I look to my network, making sure that you let people know if there's a role, like if you know anyone, here's how it is. Obviously we are big and have recruiters also, so they do their job. Nowadays I would look on LinkedIn if I had headcount.
Maybe someday. I think that's common. A lot of companies, especially large companies, are well, if they're not cutting back, there's hiring freezes all over the place still, right? But it's good for small companies like ours because there's lots of amazing talent out there who might want to jump at another opportunity. How would you describe yourself as a manager? Do you think that like becoming a better manager was a steep learning curve? How did you find success in managing your team?
Definitely a steep learning curve. I feel like leading a team and having management responsibilities, it's a huge thing to learn. And it's a lot of maturing over time to really figure out how to have empathy and lead people that that want the same thing as you and your department. I mean, I would have to ask someone on my team to answer the question about how I am as a manager, because I think their perception is the reality of how I am.
Sure.
Not how I feel I am. But I do try and lead with empathy and make sure that folks, can voice what it is that their goals are and where I can influence that. I do, and bring opportunities to them as we can, obviously with getting the needs of the department done as well.
Yeah.
And then, just making sure that, when you're information sharing with your team, it's a constant conversation about remaining flexible to the priorities of the business and the priorities of the teams, because obviously at Google, it's never a dull day.
Right.
A lot of people ask me like, what's your job or what's the job of somebody on your team? And a lot of times it's hard to answer because every day it's so different. And so, and that's really what keeps us strong as a team, because everyone has those same goals. And so as priorities shift, we are very fluid with being able to say like, okay, what is it now that needs to be parked
Sure.
What is it now that we're not going to do, or that we're, going to reprioritize or bring on a vendor to do, so that we can continue to flex to focus on the highest priorities.
Right. This was surprising to me, I guess, as I started to, grow in my career. I didn't expect that conferences and sort of the network that you build with others and the learning that happens from your peers would play as big of a role in my career as it ended up doing. I'm sure that for you too, like the ability to come to things like CLOC for many years has allowed you to bring back ideas that inform the way that you run your team, the way that you manage. You've been coming to CLOC since the first one. What was that like? And did you have any idea that it would be this big when they held the first one?
No. Yeah, I went to the first one in San Francisco, and
Yeah.
I've been to all the ones in Vegas.
Uh-huh.
I even tried to dial into the virtual one during COVID.
Oh.
But that was a little bit more challenging to stay focused. And yeah, I never imagined it getting this big. I started out going to legal tech in New York. That really wasn't all that interesting to me. I wasn't a big fan. So when CLOC started, I was actually excited. Like, I thought the content was more relevant.
Yeah.
I thought the community was really great. And so that's where I've really focused. If I'm going to attend a conference, I love to attend this one.
Yeah.
So being able to come and meet all the new people and catch up with all the folks that, you already know, I think that's
Sure.
great. But the scale of it is intense at this point. It's
Yeah.
pretty big.
Are there any other events or communities that you think that folks who are trying to grow in legal ops should definitely have on their radar or should definitely attend?
I'm a big fan of legal operators.
Yeah.
I'm on their advisory board. And I think that they do things right as well. They bring a lot of, their community is fantastic. So I love being a part of that. And I think that that's, being able to meet all the folks that are in that strong community is really important. It's been really important to me.
Yeah.
So I would suggest that one as well.
We're big fans of Colin and legal operators and what he's building. And I think his focus on community and making sure that there's a lot of peer-to-peer learning opportunities, I think that's really great.
Honestly, I enjoy it even more because CLOC is so big now. It's really, it's still wonderful to come here and see everyone, but the networking and the community building and the really personal conversations that we have in legal operators and with Colin and Akshay and, team, that is so important. That has really, really helped me grow. And I think that's, in my career at this stage, I think that's the most important thing to me.
Yeah, I feel like they complement each other in a way. Any thoughts on where the legal ops profession is headed, like where it might be in 5 years, or what this CLOC conference might look like in 5 years?
Everyone knows the buzzword is AI,
right? Sure.
So, maybe in 5 years, AI will write all of CLOC's content. Who knows? But seriously, I do think that will play a part. But I think that it's going to be a part that the legal professionals and legal operations, folks in all different types of roles are going to really need to harness.
Yes.
And help implement in really thoughtful ways. And the way I see it is, I've heard people like, oh, AI is going to take over all of our jobs. I actually think the opposite. I think there's going to be more of a need for legal operations professionals over time, because I think we have been really on this journey of shifting a lot of work, sort of into other roles so that lawyers aren't doing all the things.
Right.
And the more and more that we do that, and the more we have these, technological advances that help with certain things, the more it's going to require legal ops professionals to be there actually, directing all of that.
I think that's right. Because it's not just about the tech, right? It's people
Absolutely.
and process and policy as well. I love that perspective. And I think that folks should take comfort in that too, right? Like it might be a moment of change right now, but it doesn't need to be maybe quite as scary as folks think. I also think AI has an incredible potential, right? But I think the key word there might be potential. It's very early. Some of the ways that we're using it in our product it's really exciting, but it's also early days. And like human intervention, especially around checking outputs from these sorts of models, is really important.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm sure Google's making big investments internally in AI tooling as well. I don't know if your experience has been similar.
Yeah, 100%. I think there's a lot of potential, and we see it already in a lot of our products, and it's great. When you're working in the legal field, you need accuracy.
Yes.
So there are a lot of things that are like, okay, this is on the runway, and we're moving toward that, and we're learning, and the AI is learning.
Yep.
It's a little scary, but it's learning. And so, I think that over time, it's going to really get to the point where it helps with a lot of our processes, but it's not gonna replace the fact that like we need people that are actually, like I said, harnessing it, right? Making sure that we're not just having it spit out stuff that is going to get us in trouble.
Absolutely. I've got a couple of questions for you. Hopefully they're fun as we start to wrap up. The first one that I like to ask guests is I'm a big reader, and I also travel a lot for work, and I don't like sending emails on the airplane. I like to just read books. Is there a good book that you've read recently that you'd like to recommend to our audience?
I don't know how recently it was. I haven't been doing a ton of reading lately, to be clear.
Sure.
It's just too busy. I think the last book I read was The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna.
Oh.
Have you read that?
I have not, but I think I've seen it as like an Amazon show or movie or something like that.
It's a movie now, but I haven't seen that.
Yeah.
I tend to read a lot of like World War II books, and
cool.
It's emotional. I really enjoyed it, so maybe check it out.
Excellent. A last question for you as we wrap up. If you could look back on your days when you were just getting started, maybe getting started at Google, what's one thing that you know now that you wish you'd known back then?
Oh my gosh. Do we have time for me to write a book about that?
I'll buy
it. There's so many things I wish I had. If you have the foresight of what you're going to learn over this long of a career, right? I would say that, when you're in operations, you need to be able to scale. Mm-hmm. And I was very meticulous coming out of law firm life. Like I had to dot every I and cross every T. Yeah. When you're in operations, you can't focus on that. You have to focus on the big picture, which is what are the priorities for the business? How are we going to support our teams in order to keep up? And in order to do that, you need to not be editing every I and every T. Right. And so I think if I had known that, to be able to say like, okay, focus on the big things. Don't really kind of get in the weeds too far all the time. That probably would have helped me over the years. That's great. But I could probably come up with 100 more things if we had the time. People can meet you at CLOC or at a legal operators event and ask you in person. Okay. Is that a challenge? No. It's an opportunity. Well, this has been really great. Thank you so much for joining me for this conversation. Thank you for having me. This was fun. Yeah. And to all of our listeners, thanks for tuning into this episode of The Abstract, live from CLOC, and we hope to see you next time. If you like this one, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so leave a rating or a comment. If you'd like to reach out to me or DeAnna, our LinkedIn profiles are in the description. See you all next week.